Okay guys, so what I'm going to be demonstrating today is our chicken goujons. So what I needed you to have done before you started was to have a layout set up ready. So this layout is very self-explanatory. You just needed a rectangle. You needed 2 sections at the top and 2 sections at the bottom. I have given you an example of what I would have given you if we were in school. So you could do it digitally if you wanted to. Obviously, if you wanted to do it by hand, you will have to draw that table. So in the top 2 boxes, there will be a section for ingredients and a section for equipment. So your equipment that you will need 2 large bowls. Obviously, these bowls are slightly different to what we would use in schools because at the end of the day, I am having to do this from home. So you've got 2 large bowls and a small bowl, okay? So make sure for me that you have got the equipment being wrote down. So that's 2 large bowls and a small bowl. You will also need a red chopping board. Obviously, again, these will look slightly different on the video compared to what it will look like when we are at school because obviously I don't have the same equipment. So we've got the red chopping board. You will need a set of scales, a sharp knife, a teaspoon measurement. Obviously, if you haven't got any of those, a normal teaspoon is fine. Obviously, these aren't as accurate, but they are okay to use. You will then also need a baking tray with baking parchment already on, as you can see there. So that is the majority of your equipment. There is a couple of extra things that you will need, okay? But we'll go through those as we go. So the ingredients that we need 1 piece of chicken, 2 slices of bread, 50 grams of flour, then we'll need herbs and spices. I will repeat those measurements as we go in a little bit. Obviously, if you were making a bigger batch of this at home, so say for example you wanted to do enough to feed the family, obviously this only uses 1 chicken breast. So this would be only enough to serve 1 person. In my demonstration, I am doing a larger quantity so that you can see clearly how everything is being done. So I'm doing a double recipe. I'm showing you how you can adjust a single person's recipe to suit more people. Okay, so the first thing that you need to do is you need to get everything prepared in those bowls. So in the small bowl, what I need you to do is I need you to take 1 standard egg. With this egg, I'm going to need you to take it on the surface. We're going to crack it into our little bowl. Okay, so into our little bowl is where we are putting that 1 egg. If you get any germs of the raw eggs on your hands, obviously we have learnt about food poisoning. You should have watched that BBC video. If you have not watched it, then please pause this and go and watch it. It is extremely important that you watch that for this practical. So for this practical, when we're going to be doing a technique called beating, we do not want to use a whisk. The reason why is a whisk adds air, okay, and that would be using the whisking method. We're going to be using the beating method. So for that, we need to use a fork, okay. This fork then just combines it, only adding a very little amount of air. Not a lot, because obviously we're not folding it and we're not mixing it as much as a whisk would, because there's not as many prongs, okay. So we are going to do this by going in half circles. The reason for this, if you do it just stirring it, it's going to take a long time. My advice is to tilt the bowl slightly, so you can see that I've tilted it, and we will do it so that we go rounds. Okay, so again, it is in half circles, so I'm not going all the way around, and I am folding the mixture. And the prongs squish the yolk and the whites together. You will see there, hopefully, how if any of it gets stuck to the fork slightly, let's have a look, see if you can see it in any way. If any of it gets stuck to the fork, that means that it's not ready. So mine is not ready yet. Okay, so that is now done. So we have beaten our egg to make sure that the yolk and the white is all combined together. And so now that is done. So we can put our bowl to one side. In one of our large bowls, I will need you to measure 50 grams of flour. So obviously I've got slightly different scales to what we use at school, but they work in the same way. So we put our scales on the surface, put our bowl on top, and turn it on. We need to make sure that it is on grams, okay? So we don't want it on ounces or anything like that. We want it on grams, please. So for one chicken breast, you will need 50 grams of flour. So I am doing a double recipe. So that means I want to double all of my ingredients, okay? So where I only used 1 egg a minute ago, that is purely because I was quite clever and I got 1 egg pre-done earlier, okay? So I'm just going to quickly add that into my bowl, okay? So there is my egg that I did as an extra, okay? So remember, I'm doing a double recipe, and that is why I've got 2 eggs. Obviously, if you were doing a triple recipe for 3 people, it would be 3 eggs, 4 eggs for 4 people, etc. Okay? So obviously that is my egg doubled. So my flour, if I need 50 grams of flour, double would be, hopefully you would have said 100 grams. Okay, so 100 grams of flour. So I use a spoon just to help make it a little bit easier to measure it. Obviously, if you don't want to use a spoon, that is fine, but you might end up finding that if you put a tiny bit too much flour in, you're going to need something to take the extra out, okay? So I have measured in my flour, okay? So this is plain flour. So it's not like self-raising, it's nothing special, it is literally just plain flour. Into this, what we need to do is we are going to be taking our teaspoon measuring amounts, and we are going to measure in our herbs and our spices. So what I have at home, obviously these will look different to what they are in school, and what you might have is I put all of my seasons into little mason jars. So we're going to be using herbs. Okay, so we're going to be using mixed herbs is what I prefer to use. So it is half a teaspoon if we were doing 1 chicken breast. So it'll be, because this is a half teaspoon measurement, okay? So if we got 1/2 teaspoon for 1 chicken breast, so a whole teaspoon for 2, okay? So we've got our herbs measured. Now, the next one is cayenne pepper, okay? So we will be needing to do half a teaspoon again of our spice. Obviously, you can do whatever spices you want. So you could do chili, you could do mustard, you could do turmeric, you could do cayenne pepper like me, you could do Cajun, you could do tikka, the list goes on, okay? It is your personal choice as what you use. My advice though is make sure you are using a ground version. So that means it is in a powder and it's not going to look anything like this, where it's in clumps. So instead it's going to be in a powder form, okay? So with the cayenne pepper, if you like spice, you would do 2 teaspoons. 2½ teaspoons, so that would be how much in total? Hopefully you would say 1, okay? So if you like spice, it would be 1 teaspoon. If you're not a huge fan of spice, it would just be ½ teaspoon. Obviously, I'm doing double, so I am going to double the amount. So I've got 2 teaspoons there. So that is basically 1 teaspoon if you like spice, ½ teaspoon if you do not like spice, okay? So with that, we are then going to stir all that together, and you will see that the flour starts to change colour slightly. The reason for that is the pigment in our spices and our herbs start to mix together with that white flour, and obviously it's going to change colour. Okay, so obviously if you were using a yellow spice, it would go a bit more yellowy. So this one, it goes a bit more like a pinky colour. Okay, I know on the camera it doesn't pick it up as much, okay, but that's because obviously we're not turning it completely pink or anything like that. We are literally just combining all of our seasonings together, okay. So that is our herbs and spices put into our flour. We're going to put that bowl to one side as well. So far we have got our egg beaten together, and we've got our flour with our herbs and spices mixed together in a separate bowl. So that was the small bowl and the large bowl. Into this large bowl is where we're going to be putting our bread. So I said at the beginning that we needed 2 pieces of bread. That is for a single recipe. So hopefully you'll be able to do a bit of maths and know that if we are doubling it, we need double the amount, okay? So these slices of bread, on average, they work out to be 40 grams per slice. And we need about 80 grams of bread per recipe, okay? So with this bread, obviously we can't just use it straight like this. So what we are going to have to do is we're going to have to use a piece of equipment that I asked you to research. That piece of equipment was called a food processor, okay? So you might not have one of these at home, so you might need to buy pre-made breadcrumbs or spend a while breaking the bread up yourself, okay? So with this food processor, you can see, hopefully on this, that there is lots of different parts. There are things that keep them in place and the dial which we use in which to turn it on and off, okay? If you do not know how to use one of these, do not worry, I will be doing a demonstration in our lessons, okay? But obviously, if you would like to watch a video because you want to do it at home, that is fine. They are very self-explanatory on how to use. You literally turn it on and the blades spin around, okay? So there is nothing special about this piece of equipment, okay? What you do need to be aware of is, a good thing with this, I've just plugged mine in. So mine is on, okay? So to prove to you that it is turned on, okay, we're going to put everything into place and it will turn on, okay? So with these breadcrumbs, is you need to be aware that with a food processor, there is something very good about this. If I take the lid off, obviously now I can get my hands in next to this very, very sharp blade. Now, obviously if I had my hand in and I turned it on, normally a lot of things would just turn on. With these, they've got some very good safety measures, which means it will not turn on no matter what I do if this lid is not on, okay? So what we are going to do is we are going to blend our bread. So obviously the video is going to end up getting a little bit noisy, okay? So you'll have to bear with it. So I like to break my bread up into pieces, okay? So here I've put in 2 of my slices, not all of them because there's not a lot of room in these, okay? So we're going to put it all together and we're going to blend this together to make bread crumbs, okay? So please bear with the loud noise. I will try and pause the video, but I'm not sure if it will work for you. So we're going to pause it. I'm going to come back to you and show you what the breadcrumbs should look like at the end. Okay, so as you can see there, in comparison to where I paused it, this is now in nice fine breadcrumbs, okay? So obviously that was only 2 of the slices that I needed because I'm doing a double recipe. So I will need to do them again, okay? So it's quite simple that if you were doing this in lesson, you would literally just blend just your parts, so that's single recipe. You would take it apart, same as I just have, okay? I will remind you of health and safety when we actually do the practical, okay? So we would blend it, take it all apart, tip our breadcrumbs into our large bowl, ready for the next person. The next person would be able to come along with their bread, rip it up, same as I just did with the first one, add it in, and get going again. Okay, so I'm going to press pause once more, and I'm going to blend my second part of my bread because of me doing a double recipe. Okay, so as you can see here, it is nice and blended all together. So we've got some nice fine breadcrumbs. If you do find, however, that you've got some little lumps like this, obviously that won't be very good on our chicken. So we need to keep blending it for a little bit longer to make sure we don't have any big lumps like that, okay? Because obviously it's the crust that normally causes those lumps. So I'm going to press play. I'm going to finish doing this for you, and you will come back and you will see when it is all ready. Okay, so I have now got my double recipe of my breadcrumbs all blended together. So you can see here, it's all nice fine breadcrumbs, okay? Nice and simple. Obviously, if you were doing this by hand, you might not be able to get it as fine, but it is possible, but it just takes a minute to do it, okay? So in one large bowl, we had our breadcrumbs. Second large bowl was our flour with our mixed herbs and spices in, as you can just see there slightly. And then in the little bowl, we beat our egg together. Those I want you just to put onto one side, ready for in a moment, okay? And we will come back to those. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take our red chopping board and we are going to take our chicken. Obviously, a lot of people don't like working with raw meats, but I'm afraid when we come to school, you will need to show me that you can cook with raw foods, okay? So this is quite a large chicken breast. So this means I won't necessarily have to do double the amount of chicken because it's double the size of what we would normally use. So if you can see this line here, where we've got a bit of a fat line, you might only just be able to see it, okay? But that fat line is basically where one piece of our chicken breast would have been for what we were doing in school, okay? So that is why I know this is plenty for two. So for chicken goujons, these are basically like chicken nuggets, but instead of them being like little tiny pieces, they will be done in long strips, okay? So you will see what I want is I want you to make sure that you've got it all nice and flat on one side, so it means it's easier to cut, okay? So for this recipe, you need to be creating nice long strips, okay? So hopefully with our health and safety, you will remember about our bridge and claw method, okay? So obviously our claw method is when we're holding along one side and cutting near our fingertips. Bridge is when we're cutting in between our fingers, okay? So you will be needing to use both of these, and we're going to be needing to slice all of our chicken up, okay? So nice and easily, okay? Obviously, if you get a bit of fat, you might just need to pull it, okay? With the chicken as well, I like you to make sure there is no waste, okay? You should remember that from the little bits of cooking we were able to do in year 7, okay? That I don't like us wasting any food. So you need to try your best with this to do it and use all of it. With chicken, okay, we should know from our lesson last week that we need to make sure that we cook it all properly. Otherwise, we can end up with food poisoning. Obviously, we don't want to end up with any forms of food poisoning like salmonella or anything like that, okay? So with our work, we need to make sure that we're cutting up our chicken to as similar size pieces as possible, because obviously we don't want one piece really, really big and the rest really small, because obviously this one would not cook in the centre, or this one here would end up burnt, okay? So if you have any pieces like this where it's really wide, all you would do is you just turn it over and cut it in half, okay? So you will need to prepare all of your chicken, okay? So on your recipe sheets that you were writing in, you should have by now wrote about how we prepared our egg, prepared our flour, prepared our bread. Obviously, on that sheet as well, you've got to think about things like health and safety, okay? So you'd need to be talking about how we use our bridge and claw method to keep our fingers safe from the knife, how we make sure that we put the actual food processor together properly so that nothing can cause us any harm, okay? So you need to make sure that you are adding detail to this, okay? I will be on Firefly. You should be able to find it. Is basically the success criteria, which is basically our star marking sheet of what you need to have wrote down to achieve a good instruction sheet, okay? So that is now all of my chicken all prepared in slices, okay? Obviously at the moment I've got on this hand lots and lots of raw chicken juice. Obviously this hand I've only held the actual handle, so does this one get any germs on? Okay, so what you need to do is you need to make sure for me that you are washing your hands properly before you start going around and touching other things, okay? So I'm going to pause my video, I'm going to go wash my hands, and then I will resume and show you how we are going to do the next step of this practical, okay? Make sure you press pause as well for me while I go wash my hands, so that you can make sure that you have got everything wrote down in detail so far. Remember, with this video, you can rewind it, press pause as much as you need to do this instruction sheet to your best ability.